for joining us on the Holler. If this is your first time listening, welcome. My name's Rachel and I'll be your host. If this is your second, third, or 10th time listening, well, maybe not 10th because I think this is only the third episode we've put out. In any case, if you have listened to us before, thanks for coming back and tuning in. Today, I'm really excited about our guest. I have Elizabeth from Arthurdale Heritage joining me. So stay tuned for an episode on a really unique historical site right here in Mountaineer Country. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and who you're with.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Rachel. My name is Elizabeth Satterfield, and I am a native West Virginian. I grew up in rural Taylor County, just about 40 minutes south of where we're sitting today in Morgantown. And I have always loved historic places, and I've loved West Virginia, and that's how I grew up. So when I graduated from high school, I tried to figure out how to make that into a career. So I studied history at WVU for my bachelor's, and then I've got my graduate degrees in public history and public administration at WVU with a focus on historic preservation and Appalachian history and rural community development. And then I got a job at Arthurdale directly after that, and I've been there for about 3.5 years now.
Nice. Can you tell us a little bit about Arthurdale? What is Arthurdale?
Sure. Arthurdale is a historic site and museum in Preston County, West Virginia. We are the nation's first New Deal homestead community. There were 99 of these communities founded during President Roosevelt's New Deal in the 1930s, and Arthurdale was the very first one. It was kind of the prototype for the rest. And it was Eleanor Roosevelt's pet project. She is known really well as a humanitarian and having so many different projects as a First Lady, being one of the most active First Ladies in American history. And this is one of her projects, visiting more than 30 times. So Arthurdale Heritage today is a historic site museum that started about 40 years ago to preserve the history of this place and share the history with others. So we've been around for about 40 years doing this work, and today we have 23 acres and 13 buildings, which is a lot, but great.
Yeah, it is really cool. I always love visiting Arthurdale. I think it's such a cute little community, but then it's also really rich in history. Can you tell us a little bit about why Arthurdale is such a unique part of West Virginia's history?
Yeah, sure. Arthurdale, I think, is a really unique part of West Virginia's history because of its national significance. So even though there are 99 of these communities nationwide, most of them weren't as established and kind of whole as Arthurdale is, especially today. Many of them have faded away. They're not quite held together the same way that Arthurdale has. I think due in part because of the large amount of federal investment at the time and kind of the investment of the families that moved there. Even generations later, we're 3 or 4 generations removed, and people are still really tied to the place and feel very strongly connected to it. And I think that's really unique. There's also not a lot of historic sites in West Virginia that are focused on the 20th century history in the 1930s and 40s, and that's Arthurdale's bread and butter. So I think that's unique. We're not really interpreting like pioneer times or 19th century rural life or like homes, kind of a traditional farming setting, but instead we're a cooperative community that also had agricultural as part of it. So I think that's kind of a unique element mixed in with this like arts and cultural heritage with music and dance and weaving and other fine arts, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think you're right that it is a unique time period that we don't really see in other West Virginia historical sites. West Virginia has a lot of Civil War history, definitely a lot of that pioneer times, and so it is a really unique snapshot of what that time period was. Well, that's really cool. How do you feel like Arthurdale contributes to tourism and education in Preston County?
Yeah, Arthurdale is one of the top heritage tourism sites in the region and definitely in Preston County. We have more than 6,500 visitors every year, and that includes people who come just for tours, that includes people who come for our programs and activities, and some of our larger events. And then we also have private events that we host. We rent out our space, so we get countless number of people who come for weddings and baby showers and things like that. And we offer a wide range of activities, which I think really contributes to kind of tourism in the region. And that goes from heritage craft classes, like weaving and blacksmithing, to artisan markets and festivals, and concerts and square dances, and a little bit of everything in between. So I think we try to appeal to folks coming into the region visiting. Maybe they're just here for a day or a few days, but we also are really focused on our local community and what we can provide them. So I think that's where the education component comes in. We work really closely with the local school and other schools in the area, trying to provide educational programming and try to do it in an affordable way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that. My first time at Arthurdale was not for work. It was actually for a bridal shower. One of my friends was getting married and was from Reedsville, and that was the first time I've ever been to Arthurdale. I'm like, this is really cool.
Yeah, a lot of people's first time is not for an event or program related to us. It's something private, but then people come back and said, I was here for a wedding and I just thought it was so cool. I wanted to come back and take a tour. I'm like, great, thank you so much for coming back.
Yes, absolutely. What kind of visitors come to Arthurdale? Is it mostly locals? Do you get tourists? Are there school groups?
It's a mixture. We did have 29 states and 4 countries
That's cool.
represented last year, which is really cool. So that's quite a lot. A lot of our visitors are very focused on the New Deal, and so they kind of visit a lot of sites that were created during the 1930s, or they're very interested in the Roosevelts, especially Eleanor Roosevelt. So Eleanor Roosevelt's connection in Arthurdale brings quite a lot of folks out, which is pretty interesting. So it's a big mix of people. Sometimes we just have people who drop in and they say, I've been driving by here for 20 years and I've just never stopped in. I thought today would be the day. Other people are in the area visiting other things and they look up what to do nearby and it says Arthurdale and they come out and they have no idea what to expect and they leave really happy and surprised.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like you have a good variety of the types of visitors.
Absolutely.
How do you all make history engaging for all these different audiences, especially when you have like families with young kids?
Yeah, I think being able to personalize tours is really important. So we're a small enough site that it's not like if you went to Mount Vernon or Monticello or these big, nationally known historic sites that have a set tour, they're kind of working off of a script, you're going to hear the same thing almost every time you go. Maybe a little bit of variation between your tour guides, but generally the same thing. And there's not a lot of personalization. You're there in a tour group with 25 to 40 other people sometimes. Our tours are usually much smaller, less than 10 people per group, so I can be really personalized in my approach. So if I have a group of older folks who are really interested in Eleanor Roosevelt, I can talk a lot more about Eleanor during my tour. If I have a family with young children, I can kind of bring it down to their level and we can talk a little bit more about what was life like for kids at this time. So we try to personalize the approach and I think that is really important. We've also tried to add interactive elements to a lot of our exhibits. So this is something that's ongoing. But we opened a new exhibit last year, which has lots of hands-on activities, and we've seen a great response from kids, but also from adults. People love to, be able to touch things. You go to a museum, and usually the rule is don't touch anything. So if you can give people moments where they actually get to touch something, it makes a huge difference.
Oh, it really does. I'm definitely in that audience of people that I want to touch the things.
Yeah.
And even if I'm in like a children's museum, if there is something that I can touch or move, or if it's like, oh, flip this card over, I'm like, yeah, I want to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's across the board. All ages love to do that. So we've tried to add more of that to our exhibits.
Yeah, really cool. Let's pretend for a minute that you could have any historical figure in Arthurdale for a day. Who would you want that to be, and what all would you show them?
It's probably cliche, but I think I would ask Eleanor Roosevelt to come back, and she hasn't been there since 1960, and I would love for her to come back and see what the community is today and get her take on it. Does she think that we've done a good job? Does she have ideas for other things we could do? So I think I would show her things that have changed over time. But then I would also really focus on what we've preserved and how we're honoring her legacy and the legacy of the homesteaders. I think she would still kind of see a really strong community spirit and hopefully be proud.
What would you say is the most unexpected thing you've learned while working at Arthurdale?
Arthurdale is a little bit of an odd place, and there's so many different layers of its history that have not really been uncovered. And every time I read about Arthurdale, even though I've been studying Arthurdale for close to 4 years now, I'm always learning something new. It's kind of like putting pieces of a puzzle together. So when I'm doing research, I'm trying to figure out, like, why did they build this building the way that they built it? Why is this part here? What kind of shingles and windows were they used? So we're trying to like put puzzle pieces together, and sometimes we have very limited archival resources to figure that out. So little bits of Arthurdale history always amaze me. A great example is a couple years ago, I guess it was only a year ago now, we were tearing down a non-historic building, not original, and it was an eyesore. And in it, we found an original sign. It's huge, huge sign that was for the original general store in Arthurdale. And thankfully, we found it before the building was torn down. And it's underneath of it, the words say Arthurdale Community Store, but you can see ghost lettering underneath, which says Arthurdale Association Cooperative Store. So we know that this is the original sign, probably from 1934. Then, when it was no longer a co-op, they painted over it and changed the name to Arthurdale Community Store. So that's a super cool piece that we just kind of found in a barn, tucked up out of the way. Another cool thing that we've learned recently is a cemetery that's located nearby. We did ground penetrating radar to try to figure out how many people are buried in the cemetery. And we believe from kind of stories and records that a lot of enslaved individuals are buried in the cemetery. This was a cemetery that was from the early 1800s, so definitely much older than Arthurdale. So we just finished that GPR survey, and we think that there's probably close to 15 to 20 enslaved people buried there that don't have marked graves. So we're constantly learning new things in Arthurdale, which I think is fascinating. It's not, history is not boring. You're always kind of uncovering bits and pieces. It's like kind of like treasure hunting.
It is like treasure hunting. You're right, it is fascinating that history can continue to surprise us. And I think that places like Arthurdale have a really unique opportunity to help make history feel more alive. And so I think you guys do really good work over there, you know, showing off that we do learn new things every day. And even though this site has been here for many, many years, that you're still learning new things, which I think is super cool.
Yeah.
So I have some questions just kind of like for fun. The first one is, if Arthurdale had a theme song, what would it be?
We talked about this as a staff a lot, and we were trying to think of a theme song, and we had a really hard time. A lot of the ones we came up with were like funny and a little bit satirical, and we're like, okay, we can't use any of those. But we ended up talking about Lean on Me by Bill Withers, and Bill Withers is a West Virginia native. Lean on Me, you know, really popular song from the 70s. And we liked Lean on Me for our theme song because it's, you know, kind of all about relying on other people and this idea of like cooperation and caring for each other. And that's kind of what Arthurdale was founded on. It's like, you know, a cooperative community where everybody works together to make something good. And that's really what we still try to do. So that's what we picked as our song, our Lean on Me, which is much more wholesome than some of the other funny things we talked about.
You know, history can be funny too.
And history is always funny. You find all kinds of crazy stuff. People have always had a sense of humor. We have an idea of the past of being like serious and everybody was like kind of dour or something. And that's just not the case. People were always funny and always laughing and making jokes. One of my favorite things as I read, especially like letters or look at photographs, I'm like, people were hilarious. Like, we need to give them more credit. They're not as serious and somber as we perceive them to be.
Yeah, well, I think it's hard when the only time we experience history is like in a history book in like a middle school classroom.
Absolutely.
There's not a lot of humor.
No, it's all very like facts and figures, and history's so much more than that.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Is there a secret spot or little known detail around the site that you wish more people noticed?
I have two things that I liked that I specifically noticed in Arthurdale that I think a lot of visitors probably pick up on, but they're my very favorite components. One is all the intricate stonework in Arthurdale. So you see that in several of our main buildings, our museum building, our blacksmith's forge, the Esso gas station. But there's one particular spot kind of between the museum building and the gas station that's this beautiful little stone arch. And it's kind of tucked back in, and unless you walk around the building kind of in a weird way along the road, you don't notice it, and it's kind of tucked way back in. And that's one of my favorite spots. Even though it's odd and kind of like next to air conditioning units now, it's just really cool, the stonework that they put into it. The other thing that I think is absolutely beautiful in Arthurdale is all of the trees. We have gorgeous, beautiful, mature maple and oak trees throughout the property, especially around kind of in front of our main campus. And then there's even more by our Airbnb, which is a historic cottage that we've turned into vacation housing. And all of these are probably 150 to 200 years old, if not some of them a little bit older. So they're way older than Arthurdale, and they just give it such like a peaceful, serene setting, and you can feel how old the place is. And I love these trees. My favorite tree sits on in the corner, and her name's Bertha, and she's this big maple tree. We tapped her for maple syrup this year, and she did great. She produced so much sap. She's a hard worker.
Wow.
So we love Bertha. She's probably upwards of 250 years old.
Oh, wow. I love that you named the tree.
Yeah, Mary, my coworker, and I said, I think this tree needs a name. And in my head, I thought Bertha. I did not say it out loud, and out of Mary's mouth said Bertha.
Oh, it was meant to be.
And it was meant to be, so we both named her Bertha.
I love that. That is her name.
Yes.
Well, it's interesting hearing you talk about, you have this really historic stonework next to air conditioning units, so that you have like an Airbnb on the property, these really like modern things. How do you balance preserving the historical integrity of the site with making it accessible and appealing to modern visitors?
Yeah, it can be tricky to have this balance. Sometimes you go to places and they've kind of tipped over too far and it starts to become kitschy and they've lost their historic integrity. Other times places are so focused on it that they aren't relevant anymore. So it can be really difficult to strike this balance, and we always are walking the line. It's not easy. All of Arthurdale is on the National Register of Historic Places, which means that if federal funding is involved, which often at Arthurdale it is when we receive grants to do preservation projects, that there's a lot of rules that we have to follow. So we're very good about doing that. We're very focused on making sure that we maintain historic integrity. And that means that we do very little alteration on our buildings, and any work that we do stays true to the original kind of like form and function of the space as much as possible. We also want to stay true to our mission, so we don't want to put like a bunch of yurts in the back field because that's a field that was always agricultural. So we don't want to put like a campground in when that would totally alter the historic view shed. Turning our little cottage into an Airbnb where it's still housing. The house itself hasn't been altered. It's just not a permanent residence. Instead, we have different folks coming in throughout, each month to stay in the house. That's okay. Like, we feel comfortable with that. It's not altering the space in any substantial way. Our main motto is to do no harm, and you want to do things that can be reversed. So you don't want, it's the same kind of method in archival work that if you're working with historic documents and you're labeling them or kind of doing conservation work or something like that, you don't want to do anything that can't be reversed. So any work that we do, we try really hard to make sure that we're honoring the historic integrity. Two good examples that we have on our campus would be our outdoor event space, which used to be the furniture factory. They had a cooperative furniture factory in Arthurdale, which closed in the early 1940s. And sometime in the late 60s, early 70s, there was unfortunately a fire that kind of destroyed several buildings in Arthurdale, the furniture factory among them. What was left are beautiful stone ruins, and stone and concrete. And about 3 years ago when I started, I saw this back there. Everything was in ruins, it's all overgrown. I was like, this would be such a cool outdoor event space. Like, we don't have to do that much work to it to at least have space to do something. So we got some grants and we got it all cleaned up, poured a new concrete slab, shored up some of the masonry, and we hung like twinkle lights, and it's a beautiful outdoor event space. So very minimal changes, and all of the kind of structure is the same, but it has a new use of being outdoor event space, and people get to still experience the space. So I think that's a good balance. Another example would be our historic blacksmith's forge. It's still a forge today. It's a beautiful working forge. It has been since 1934, fully equipped. We have demonstrations and classes. So that building, rather than having a different use, like the furniture factory is now an event space, the blacksmith's forge is still a blacksmith's forge. So there's definitely moments where we can do that. We can keep everything the same. Your question about accessibility is interesting. Accessibility is really hard in historic buildings.
It really is, because they weren't thinking about people with motorized wheelchairs or mobility aids in the 20s.
Correct. So it's hard to do that. We are kind of grandfathered in, and we're not, forced to do anything with our historic buildings to make them accessible, but we really try our best to do that. So our main museum is fully accessible. A wheelchair will fit, through all of the doorways, and it's all one level, so there's not any kind of issues with different floor coverings and things like that. We have restrooms that are accessible, and our gift shops accessible, and our main hall, which hosts a lot of our events, and that's where a lot of our private events are held, is also accessible. When we redid our loom room, which is our weaving studio in the basement of our main hall, we decided at that time we wanted to make it accessible. So that was a space that is in a basement, and it's kind of weird to get into it. The main door for it was when you stepped in, you stepped down like 4 inches, and we could not put a ramp inside because it would take up such a large amount of space in the room to keep it at the proper like angle that a ramp is supposed to be. So we ended up putting a ramp on the outside and putting a new door in, and that way people can get in, and then once they're in, there's an ADA restroom, and it's a beautiful studio space that's fully accessible. So we try to balance it, but like our museum house, it's built in 1935. There's 2 floors. There's no way we can ever add an elevator. So unfortunately, the second floor of that house will never be accessible. So we try to have a balance and have options for folks, but unfortunately, we just can't make everything fully accessible.
That definitely is a challenge, but it sounds like you guys have made an effort to make it as accessible as you can. As a side note, I love that you mentioned the Arthurdale gift shop because I am a big fan.
Thank you.
Of the gift shop. I feel like every time I go, I could probably spend like $100. There's just like the cutest little things in there.
I love our gift shop. It's all West Virginia artisans. We have more than 80 local artisans represented in there, and like food, woven items, stickers, t-shirts, ceramics, books by local authors, a little bit of everything. So I do all my gift shopping in our shop.
Well, talking about the challenges that come with like making a historic site accessible, what are some of the challenges of running a historic site in a rural area like Preston County?
One of the main challenges is not just for rural places in West Virginia, but just being a small nonprofit is hard in itself, especially right now when grants and funding are threatened. So this is kind of across the board. It doesn't matter if you're in a rural area or an urban area, people are kind of feeling it right now. We're really blessed, like I said, to have a strong community support and lots of volunteers. But that's hard. It's hard to get people engaged, especially when we're a little bit further removed from large population centers. We're 30 minutes from Morgantown and 2 hours from Pittsburgh. So we're kind of out tucked away in the middle of nowhere, which I love. I love that I work somewhere that's like where I grew up, and it's not congested. I don't go to an office building. I'm at a rural historic site. I love that. But that can be hard for people who, look up things to do and they say, ugh, that's like an hour drive. That's too much. So that's kind of tricky. People who come to Arthurdale, like intentionally come to Arthurdale. It's not something where you're walking down the street and you see a sign for a museum and you're like, oh, let's just do that while we're here. Right. You have to make a trip to Arthurdale. I think it also is hard to balance being a public organization, something where we're welcoming the public on a regular basis, but we're a private nonprofit, and our property is private property. We're not like a public park, but people see Arthurdale as almost like a local government or a public park, and they see it as community space. That's great. I love that people see us as still the center of the community. There's another side of that which can be tricky, where people aren't always understanding that we're private and that we need donations and we need your help. We're not just given a bunch of money by the county or the state or the federal government. We're working really hard to stay afloat. So that's a hard balance to strike, to still be community minded, but also remind people that hey, we need your support. There's a dichotomy between engaging the local community, but also we want to bring tourists in. So how do we do both of those things well? And those are 2 totally different audiences, and that can be hard. Working here for the Convention and Visitors Bureau, that you have to kind of cater to a bunch of different audiences, right, which can be tricky. So we're constantly trying to find that balance. So we're wearing a lot of different hats, which can be tricky.
You definitely do wear a lot of different hats.
Yeah.
And you have a lot going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some opportunities that make you excited for the future of Arthurdale?
I'm always so excited for the future of Arthurdale.
I love that.
I feel like we have such a strong vision for the future, and a lot of that is community centered. I'm very excited with the historic spaces we have. I love the work that we've already done with many of our buildings and preserving them. but I think our outdoor event space has even more potential. We'd love to have a roof over it. We'd love to have big industrial glass doors that open and close so it can be an indoor-outdoor space. Like, I'm thinking like brewery vibes, you know, but not a brewery, but like those like indoor-outdoor vibes with like twinkle lights and fire pits. I don't know.
Yes.
I have this like beautiful vision of that space.
Love.
Yes.
I always joke with my friends that if we see twinkle lights, that's where we're gonna eat.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's not twinkle lights, I don't want to be there.
No, I'm like, I want to drink out of a mason jar.
Yeah.
I want like a taco flight.
Correct.
Something cutesy like that. As a 25-year-old millennial, I'm a big fan.
So I think we have we have a lot of space, you know, 13 buildings, 23 acres, that's a lot. But I think that means there's a lot of potential for growth and even more like programming space, event space, things like that. I think we also have a really strong heritage arts and cultural opportunities in Arthurdale. This is something we've been building over the last couple of years. And with Mary Lynn Schott as our Appalachian Programs Coordinator, she's really been building this more and more. So we have square dances every other month. We have multiple concerts a year. We have so many classes that are, you know, related to fiber arts, blacksmithing, sustainability, and like subsistence lifestyles like canning and kombucha and food waste, things like that. So a little bit of everything there. So I think that's growing more and more, and I'm very excited about that. And we have our blacksmith forge that's fully restored. We have our weaving studio. We just restored a barn where we're able to do kind of messy classes like stained glass and window restoration. So I'm very excited about that branch of Arthurdale. The other thing that's a little bit more my speed is updating a lot of our interpretation around the campus, like the history and the stories that we're telling. So this year we're going to be installing new outdoor signage. So if you visit our site and maybe we're not open or you don't have time to take a tour or you're just there for a special event, you can walk around and read signs outside that tell you the story of Arthurdale. So I'm very excited about that, as well as updating some exhibits in the future inside of our buildings.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you kind of touched on this a little bit with your square dancing and your classes, but what are some upcoming events that you think visitors should know about?
I had a hard time narrowing down a list for you, but I picked a few. We have our next square dance on June 14th. It will be in our beautiful outdoor event space if the weather's good. If not, we'll move into the hall. That's no problem. But, you know, picture twinkle lights and live old-time music and a caller. Great for beginners. You don't have to have a partner. It's June 14th at 7 p.m. and we're going to have a lemonade vendor. So you can have lemonade and a square dance. That sounds awesome. On West Virginia Day, which is June 20th, we'll be offering free tours that entire day. So if you've never visited Arthurdale and maybe cost is a barrier, come on out. Our big event of the year is July 12th. It's our New Deal Festival. This year will be even bigger than usual. It runs from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Live music, food trucks, craft beer, old-time fiddle contest, car show, kids activities, artisan market, even more than that. It's amazing. So that will be July 12th. We also have a live production of Macbeth that's going to be on August
really cool.
1st. Yeah, so there's only one Shakespeare troupe in West Virginia, and they're going to be coming to Arthurdale August 1st, and it will be outside in our outdoor event space, and it will be a Shakespeare in the round. So they'll be in the middle. We'll be all seated around them in a circle as Shakespeare intended. So we're very excited about that. And then we have lots of recurring events like Preston County History Days, the third Sunday of every month till October. So that's free tours at Arthurdale and lots of other historic sites in Arthurdale, or in Preston County, I mean. And then every Wednesday we have community morning. So if you just want to stop in, have a cup of coffee, sit down, chat with some folks, do some puzzles. We have other activities that we're planning every Wednesday, so that's Wednesdays at 9. And then there's a lot more that I couldn't include on the podcast because there's too many.
You can't list everything that's going on at Arthurdale. Where can people find out more information about Arthurdale?
Yeah, our website, it's always up to date. It's arthurdaleheritage.org. We also have a Facebook and an Instagram, and both of those, if you search Arthurdale Heritage, will pop right up. So we post regularly. All of our events are listed on there. Little history lessons, so give us a follow and, you know, check out our website.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming and talking to me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me, Rachel. Anytime I get to talk about Arthurdale, it's a great day.
And that's all for today's episode. If you have an idea for someone we should have on the show or a topic you'd like us to cover, leave a comment on this episode or email info@visitmountaineercountry.com with the subject line podcast. To learn more about Visit Mountaineer Country, head to visitmountaineercountry.com. And to keep up with all the fun things we're doing, make sure to check us out on social media. Thanks again for joining us in the Holler. Keep coming back to hear stories about cryptids, hidden gems for foodies, inspiring stories from small business owners, and so much more. That's all for now. We'll holler at you soon.